Laura, I know that you've been very engaged in some of the sort of capacity building work that's been done, consulting, training, some of the issues that Gabby brought up, the kind of the human part of getting this stuff used effectively. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on the presentation that Gabby had given, particularly around this capacity building area.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, it's a huge issue, and truthfully, and our friends at Ushahidi say this, it's 90% of the issue. The tech is, getting the tech up and working is 10% of the effort. 90% of the effort is training, rolling out systems, explaining it to people, making sure it works, fixing issues that arise. It's a human issue. And at the grassroots level, working with our partners and your partners, it's a confused and a confusing picture, I think. There are lots of conflicting impulses around use of technology, whether for moving value around, moving money or airtime or vouchers, or whether just for logistics or information management or staff management. And I think one of them is, the ubiquity of technologies like mobile. Now, in many of these contexts, people are used to using them on a personal level, for all sorts of everyday transactions, like paying bills or, responding to a survey on the radio or anything like that. And so when they come to work and they then can't use those tools, it's something that ends up happening informally. So I worked with somebody who ended up getting a text message from a beneficiary whose bus had broken down on the way home from a cash distribution, and who ended up 10 of them staying at his house because they were using personal mobiles to interact, because that's just how things are done. So what we're starting to see is those local partners picking up some of these tools, and basically what we're seeing is the professionalization of platforms like SMS. It happened with the internet. First of all, it was all of us on GeoCities blogs messing about, and no one was sure it was going to amount to anything useful, and then look where we are now. So I think we're seeing that happen, and the pressure of, how can we use these tools to just get stuff done, because the pressure to achieve is immense. And then perhaps talking to head office or talking to a funder and really meeting this resistance, this kind of puzzlement. And, but how robust is this? And what about security? And isn't that open to or vulnerable to graft? And all of these issues are, in our experience, surmountable or, able to be mitigated or offset by advantages. Not every time, but a lot of the time you can find ways around these issues. So I think for us it's often trying to be a bit of a bridge or help people think around some of these issues. The issues that we all face, though, or that international agencies face trying to roll this out at grassroots level, because that's really what would make this sustainable, right? And pre-positioned ahead of an emergency would be capacity building at grassroots level. So you're dealing with issues of, essentially, you're walking in and trying to do change management in many ways. You're often, as Gabby was saying, if this works, why would I do it any differently? And you have to find those change agents who are already keen to do things in a cleverer way, in a more efficient way. You often end up building kind of bolt-on systems. So we have this form that you use to do this kind of requisition, but when you do it with the mobile phone or with something else, it looks totally different, and it interacts differently, possibly with a different member of staff. So, or when you're rolling out a mobile monitoring and evaluation system, how far is it embedded into your existing M&E systems, or how far do your existing M&E systems need to flex in order to accommodate a greater volume of better data, with the sort of quid pro quo being that sometimes the volume is, the form is shorter because of constraints of technology. So this is the cost benefit that you have to do. But the aim here has to be sustainability. Otherwise, there's always going to need to be some external force coming in, bringing in training or technical support or money to stand up and keep going these systems. So what you're building has to be something that can keep going when the emergency is over and we've all left. So what contributes to that? It's availability of the technology. Whatever hardware you're using has to be available on the ground in the place that you're working. So this is why mobile is so powerful, because low-end mobile phones that with SMS will work on any mobile phone, no matter how cheap and old. And as we all know, the cheaper and older the phone, the better, the more hard-wearing it is, right? And the more likely it is that it still works 5 years after you bought it. So these are the kinds of handsets we should be thinking about if we're going to really try and reach the broadest number of people. It needs to be easy to pick up and use, if possible. You don't need to have a technical background to use it. I'm not an IT person by training, and I think FrontlineSMS is designed to be easy to pick up and use, and that's something that's a big focus for us and for many of us in the space. Ushahidi also is a free and open source tool. There are growing numbers of us, and the only way that open source tools spread is if they're easy to use without much training. So that's a big focus for all of us, and I think it contributes substantially to sustainability. The goal here, as I was saying, has to be to reduce dependence of the continued existence and good functioning of any kind of system like that on someone else coming in. And that's also about, proliferation. So you're only going to be able to pilot in a certain breadth of places. So rollout has to also be sustainable. It has to be something that the agency or the local partner can pick up and run with on their own. So it doesn't need another server. It doesn't need a 1 week-long training course and so on and so forth. It kind of brings me to just a few closing challenges and points, if that's all right, Paul. One is, I think it's important to let 1,000 flowers bloom to a degree. I don't think you're looking for one tool to bring them all here. I think you're looking for a good toolkit. But I think what has to be at the back of that is good open data standards, so that you can then still, those systems are interoperable to a degree. But understanding that, contexts are very specific. So for mobile money, for example, every context you operate in is going to be different. And it's in fact going to be different depending on region of the country, because it depends on network availability. I think the other thing here is the acceptance of a slight, so informality is king in the developing world, as we know. The systems that work are the ones that work the best for the most number of people, and sometimes that means they're not 100% robust from a security point of view. So if you're under pressure to demonstrate greater value for money and you need greater data flow, you may have to sacrifice a completely secure platform in order to use something like SMS, which is inherently an insecure data transmission system, for example. And I think that's something that it's one of those cost-benefit analyses we'll have to do. And the big one is, for me, the humanitarian agencies have yet to really find a way to come up with a coordinated ask, either of us as tools providers or of the private sector, who can do an awful lot to help. People like the GSM Association, for example, which is the trade body for mobile networks, are crying out for a coordinated ask from the humanitarian system they can actually action. But even convening that discussion is a challenge. So just a few questions and thoughts. Hope that was useful.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you.